example, we decided to call it index. So here is data dictionary for this problem. So the car makers is using the list of strings, and the variables we're using are index, length, and make. And that's how the program runs, basically. Again, it's very good exercise for you to spend time looking at the desk checking for this example. It helps with solving your assignments and subject work. This is a bit more compact version of the above for loop, and it's using I as a counter rather than index, and it adds a heading and formatting as well. So this is doing similar, using the for instead of the while, where I in a range of the length to get us the numbers, and then we print it in there. So here's another review exercise for the car makers list. How can you calculate the last index from the length of a list? And what do you think would happen if you try to print car makers 4? So what we're looking here for is how to calculate what's the last index number. And the second question is, what will happen if you want to print index 4? Josh, give me an answer. Someone.
It would error, I'm pretty sure. But I'm just going to give it a go and see what happens.
That's correct. It will give you an error because you're using an index that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's an error. Do you want me to show you? Or?
Yeah, share it. Let's let everyone have a look at that.
I think you have to stop screen sharing for me to.
Yep.
Yeah. Here we go. Yep. So it just says trace back most recent call. So it works for the first little bit of the code, which is that bit, but then that second bit, but it doesn't work for that third bit. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And for the first one, anyone want to share their result? So how can you calculate the last index from the length of the list? So when we're looking for, so basically what we need to do is we need to get the length of the car maker, which is 4, and then minus 1 from it because we start with a 0. So if we get the length of this list, it will give us the number 4 because there's 4 items in it. And if I want to get the last index number of that list, we need to remember that because we start with 0, then whatever number we get here, we minus 1 from it to get us 3. If this was 6, then or 6 items, then the last index number would be 5, which is basically 6 minus 1.
The same with formatting, isn't it? You know how you format 0, format 1.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's always start with a 0 and then goes up from there.
Mustafa,
yes.
Just a quick question with the pseudocode, you know how it goes? It says index plus equals 1. Why wouldn't it be index equals index plus 1?
Sorry, where is that?
So in the, for example,
this one here?
Sorry, just look at the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this is equivalent to saying index equal index plus 1.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's just a shortcut of doing it in, that way instead of saying index equal index plus 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost where we were. Yeah. So for adding multiple lists together, so lists can be combined using the plus operator. Plus mean concatenating or joining together a list, and it's not addition. So the plus equal operation can be used for that. So for example, we have car maker 1 list, which have a list of these cars, 4 cars, and then car maker 2, which have 2 items in it. Then if we want to add them together, we can have car maker, so a new list that add 2 lists together. We can also add an item by itself, but I have to use this format, which is a bracket and the item in the middle. This we just talked about similar to index. So this car maker's plus equal car maker 1. It's same as saying car maker 2 equal car maker 2 plus car maker 1. So this is just adding the 2 together. Just pay attention to what happened here. So when we said car maker 2 equal plus equal car maker 1, what we're doing here, what I want you to pay attention to, the difference between what we're doing here and what we're doing here, it's just the location of items. So this one have 1 plus 2, so start with 1, which is that one, and then 2, which is these ones. Whereas that one start with car maker 2, which is equivalent to car maker 2 equal car maker 2 plus car maker 1. Make the list start with car maker 2 first, and then put car maker 1 later. So car maker 1 and car maker 2 are unchanged after the above. In the above list are being combined, not individual items. So Nissan need to be enclosed with these brackets. That's how we use them. Review exercise. So we have a student list number 1, which have 3 items, and student number list 2, which have 2 items. We want you to write a code to create a new student list from which called student list 3 with all of the students in it. So this is a similar example to what we did with the cars makers. What will be displayed by printing student list 3? Write the code to add student number 3232 to student number 3. What would be displayed by print student 3 now? And if student number 2300 was added to the student number 3, what would the list be? So this is how it will look like. So just like we did with the car maker, student 3 will equal student 1 plus student 2. When we want to print that, it will basically just combine the 5 items now into one list. When we want to add an extra number, just like we did with Nissan, we add it and we put it between brackets. There's no commas in here because this is a string. Sorry, this is an integer. Then when we want to display now the new student number 3, that after we added that one, it will look like the 5 previous one plus the new one. And again, if we add another one, it will add it to the end. So what we want you to understand from this is when you add to the list, we'll add it to the, automatically will default to adding it to the end of the list. So one item can be added to the end of the list using the list append function. So this is a bit different to what we were doing before when we just added by plus. So for example, a car maker, Ford, Holden, Mazda, Toyota, we can use the command append now to add Audi to it. So the above after this functions will, if we print it, it will look like that. So this is important to pay attention to it because that's what we're going to be using when at the start of the lecture we talked about empty list that we want to fill up while we're running the program. That's the command we're going to be using. So here's an example of adding item to our list using a loop. So one of the convenient way to add multiple items to our list is to use the Sentinel control loop. The initial list is an empty one, and then we add item using the append function. So an example code is we wanted to add multiple lap times in a list containing the lap time made by racing car driver. So to do that is we start with an empty list called lap time. Then we prompt the user to input the lap time, in which we then in here we inputting that lap time into the list. Then we printing it, and then we prompt the user again to input the next lap time with the option of using 0 to exit. So an example run of that is lap time so far is empty. Then lap time, first time we enter the value, now the list will look, when we print the list, it will have the first item in there. Then we enter the second lap time, and then we print the list. It will look like the first and then the second items, and continue to do that until we prompt the loop to stop by putting the Sentinel value of 0. And once the last time we print, it will basically contain all the items that we have inputted through the run of that program. So that's what makes like one of the major use of lists. We can also find items in a list using the in operator. So it's easy to search for an item in a list using the in operator and the not in. So if we could be checking for example, a value, whether it's a valid value from a list, or we want to make sure that we're avoiding a specific value from a list. That's when we're using the not. So an example here, if Mazda in car makes, so print Mazda in the list, else it's not in the list. And if you're assuming car maker have Mazda, then it will print it. If it doesn't, it will just not find it in the list. Similarly, if we prompt the user to input the month number from 1 to 12, and we're saying if the month that was inputted is not part of the one of the listed months, then we want to print that this month does not have 31 days. So if we input here 2, this function will say is 2 not in the list, which it's not. Therefore, we'll print that this month doesn't have 31 days. Any question on that one?
It's coming up with an error when I put that code in. Saying,
which part?
The first, if Mazda in car makes, and it's saying unresolved reference car makes. So I think you'd have to previously make maybe car makes and then create the list, and then
yes, correct.
So it can't just be on its own. I think.
No. So the assumption here is we have a list called car makes, and the car makes then need to so either use the two difference between here and here. This one using a predefined list, which is called car makes. So in your program, you will have a predefined list with the values in it of the car makers. In the second example, it's made the list in there. So it put the list in there. So if I want to do equivalent of that in here, I could be saying is Mazda in open brackets Toyota, Holden, Ford, BMW, blah 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 blah, close the brackets, and then it will be checking for that value in there. But because I used the assumption that the reason in this lecture is used is because we are using car makers
previously. Yeah. So I just added some of the previous code and it likes that now.
It likes that.
Yeah.
Okay. A list of names can be searched using the AND operator. The following code will stop when an empty string is inputted. So in here, so see what we're doing here. We're defining that list and we're putting these values in that list. And then we want to ask or prompt the user to input a name. And while there's not space, because that's our sentiment value. So if the name of the driver, if the name, so whatever you input here, it's within the list, then we'll say the name is, so that person is a driver, otherwise it's not a driver. And then we repeat the loop. So that's an example run. So we put Anne, and Anne is a driver because it's part of the list. And we'll put Peter, and so this code will go and search for the name Peter, and when it doesn't find it, it will come back as not a driver. Any other question around this? So validation using a list. So a list can be used for validation. So for example, if we prompt the user to put a choice and the input is expected to be a yes or a no. So a while statement could be while choice not in, and in here we are giving them possible acceptable values. So if it's none of these, so if the user didn't put yes or no, then we will display an error and prompt the user to re-enter the value. So in some of the example, we were using if not equal that, and then or equal this, and or, and all these things. This makes it much easier to have the acceptable values. whether included or discluded. Review exercise. Write a code to ensure that a string entered by the user is valid, abbreviated state or territory in Australia. So example, Vic, New South Wales, and so forth. So spend some time doing that. And then we can have a 10-minute break with that. We'll be back 5 to 10. And I'm expecting someone to share their code. And if I don't get volunteers, I might volunteer people. All right, back shortly. All right. Do we have any volunteers?
I can volunteer if no one else does.
Come on, someone else.
Yeah, I can.
I've got one.
All right. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Wait, who do you want us to? Who do you want to share, me or Dale?
You guys decide, Dale.
Fight for it. Fight.
Okay. So you can see that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're after?
I was expecting a loop.
Oh, sorry.
I'll show you my solution. So how does the show us a run?
Okay, so hang on, I can't see my controls. Hang on. So if I enter Victoria, it'll then just print Victoria. If I run enter it incorrectly, it'll say incorrect abbreviation, please re-enter state abbreviation.
Yeah. So I'll show you similar to that. Where's the share button? So my solution looks like that. So I'm prompting the user to input the state and territory of Australia. While the state is not in the acceptable option, we want to print an error, and then we want to ask for or prompt the user to re-input the state.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're out of that, then that means the abbreviation entered was correct. Then that's when we print the state and territory. Good. All right. Now, processing a list totaling. So previously when we were doing totaling, we used to increment the number, but there was no way for us to actually see what these values that were entered in one place. So using a list, we can now do that. So in this example, and I'll show you the Python run of it, is we're creating a price list, a list variable, empty one, that we will be populating with, and it's the lists prices that we're entering. Then we are prompting the user to input their prices with a sentiment value of -1 to exit that loop. So while we're exiting that loop, we're using the append function to add the price that we're inputting to the list that we created, which is a price list. And then for totaling, so now that we've created that list, and now that we inputted, or now the list containing all of the values, we're running now a for statement, which would be running to add up the prices and then display them. So this is an example run where I put the first price 150, then 250, 100, 150, 250, and then -1 to exit. So you can imagine that now we created a price list containing 3 items in it. And then we going in a loop to add up these prices one by one. So this will be starting at a 0, and then all the way to 2, and 0 being the index number, to get us the total, and then we'll display it. All right. Now we want to do something similar to that. In fact, very similar. Is to write a code to display a list of prices and and the GST on the items, assuming the data is already in the price list. So unlike the previous example where we're inputting the values, in here we want a program assume that the price list is already there. So we just want to, and this price, the price of the items already include the GST in it. So the amount of GST in the price included need to be calculated. So the GST is 1/11 of the final price of an item. Things that we can discuss about that exercise is why is the GST, it's 1/11. So you need to understand when we're looking at the price, and GST is basically the price, then we add 10% to it. So when we're looking at the total price of, for example, 110, which is 100 for the item, 10 is the 10% of the 100, which give us the price plus GST. To 10% of the GST is always 10 divided by 110. So 110 being the the price, which is 1/11 of the GST. If the GST was 20%, then you need to imagine it as 100 plus 20 would be 120, and then 20 divided by 120 would be, I think, 1/6 of the price. But just focus on that one. So just write a program that does this calculation. Very similar to the one above, except the list is already provided to you. All right, let's have a look how this will look like. So for the price list, we basically have a for loop, which uses the price list. Then we get the GST by dividing the price by 11, and then we just print it. So it's just a simple calculation. All right, now processing parallel list. So two lists may have related information. For example, the driver and best time lap lists have related information in the same positions. So parallel list, for example, the driver 0, so index 0 is Kathy, and the best time lap time for it is also in the same in the second list, but the same index position of 0. Then the same with Kath and Kim. So if we have a problem to display the driver name and their best lap time, so we define the first list, which is the driver names. Second list is their best time, best lap time. Then we just run a while loop using the maximum length of the list. So this will be equivalent to, first run of that would be equivalent to is 0 less than length of the drivers, which is the length of this index. It's 3. So it's 0 less than 3. You go print I, which is in the first run, it will be 0 and 0. So that will be Jane 38.3. Then we're incrementing the variable I. We come back is 1 less than 3. It is, and we print the second one, and then the third one, and then the last one will be 3. Is 3 less than 3? It's not, and that's when we stop once we print Kim. This can also be written in a different way. So we could be using for I in the range of that length, and then we print that. With list, we can also insert an item into a list. So the insert function allows allow an item to be inserted into a list. So when we're talking about insert, it's different to when we're talking about adding. Insert will allow us to insert it at a specific location, whereas adding will add it at the end of the list. So the item with index greater than or equal to index of the item being inserted are moved up one place to make a gap for the new items being inserted. So if the index is beyond the end of the list, the item is appended to the end of the list. So if I want to insert something at location, at index number, say in this example here, 10, the Python will recognize that there's nothing beyond 3, so we'll just put it on position 4 or index 4. So an example of that is car makers for Holden, Mazda, and Toyota, and that's how the index and the items looks like. Then I could, using this command, which is car makers, that's the list name, dot insert. So I want to insert a value, but I want to specifically insert it on the first index. So now all of these will be moving one up, and BMW will be inserted at the start of the list. Similarly, if we're inserting then at location at index 4 Subaru, then whatever is after it will be moving one up and will be put in that position. And then if I say a number outside of the range of what the existing list is, it will just be added at the end. This would be wasting of time because there's no point doing that. You can just add it. Removing an item from a list. So the remove function allows an item to be deleted from the list. Items are removed by value, not index. So unlike insert, when we're inserting, we specifying the index position to add in the list, whereas when we're removing an item, we refer to the item itself. So if I want to remove, for example, Holden, I don't refer to it as the position, but I refer to the actual item. So the following will remove or delete the leftmost occurring of Holden in the list. So I'm saying in this code, if Holden is in car mix, so if the word if the item Holden it's in the list, then I want to use this command, list name dot remove Holden, and then will be successfully removed. Now, if Holden, we always need to check that what we're trying to remove exists in the list, because otherwise it will error. And also, if there's multiple appearance of that value, the most left one would be removed. Any question about removing or adding items? Slicing a list is part of slicing may be obtained by slicing a list. So slicing is a list return a copy of part of a list. So you could decide to have a slice of the first two, or the last two, or the middle two items from a list for whatever reason that is needed. So a list start index and end index. So this will list from start of index to the index end of index minus one inclusively. List end index. So this will list from index 0 to index end index minus 1. And start index will list from the start of the index and end of the list, end of the list. So let's have a example. We'll look at examples. So if we have this letters, and we have the index and items table. So if I want to print start to end, so this will display the list with index 1 up to an index 2. So 3 minus 1 equal 2. This basically will print the FND, which is this one. Print letters 3, which is basically we want to list items with index 0 up to an index 2, because this it's minus 1 is equal to, which is mean we end here, which gives us the start R, second F, and third D. This one is the opposite. So let's display a list of index 2 up and including index 4. So this basically the length of the whole thing, which is 4 minus 1. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the length is 5 minus 1. And that gives us the last 3. So review exercise using the lists containing race lab time shown below. Write code for the following question. So the variable lap time have these items in it. This is the table for it. And if you ever want to use a list and you're not sure about how to deal with it, I always recommend you to use the table, because that gives you an understanding of the difference between index and items, and will make it clear for you to understand for each item what's their index number. So display the first 4 items in the list, and then display the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th item of the list, and then display the last 2 items. So write code, which is similar to what we're doing here, or what we did here, to display this.
Did you notice the drivers' names, Mustafa?
Sorry?
You know how there's Jane, Kath, and Kim?
Kim, yeah. I just coincident. So to give you a few hints, like when we're talking about display the first 4 items in the list, when we look at this example, which one of these is doing something similar? So this one is displaying the first 3 items in here. And the way the code was used is it's like that. So for me, if I want to display the first 4, all I need to do is change that from 3, because that's what gave me 3, to 4, and this will give me the first 4. That's how you answer the first one. Similarly with that one, that's close to that, where it display things in the middle, except we want to do 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So what we will put here. So here's what the answer looks like. So the first one, we put 4, that gives us the first 4. The second one, we start with 2 to give us the 3rd item, and then up to 6 to give us the last one. And then the last one, display the last 2, because the last 2 is 5 and 6. We start with 5 and give us 5 and 6. So to copy our list, we create a new list consisting of an empty list and the list to be copied. So for example, car makers copy equal an empty list plus car makes. Does not copy a list, car maker equal car makers. So that's not how we copy. We need to create the list and then add the existing one to it. Sorting a list, so that could sometimes be useful. So sort function can be used to sort the list into ascending, increasing orders. Numeric lists are sorted into numeric orders and string into alphabetics. So for example, sorting a list. So if we have lap times with these numbers, we want to sort it, we use the command sort. And this will sort this number in ascending way. Note if you don't want, so this will change the original list. If you don't want to change the original list, you could create a new copy of that lap times where you can sort it. So the last review question for the lecture is using a list containing marks for an assignment shown below. Write the code for the following questions. So we provided the list, which called mark and marks, and it have these items in it. Write a code to display the lowest mark of the for an assignment, and then write a code to display the highest mark for the assignment. That should be an easy one. All right. So for the first question, to write the lowest, so we basically sort the marks and in ascending way, and what that means is whatever in the first indexed item will be the lowest, and that's why we then printing it. And then for the highest number is basically we figuring out the index highest number, which is basically the length of the list minus 1. So remember the index, because it started at 0, it's always 1 less than the length to get to the last index item. That's how we print it. So key points. Lists are very useful. They're flexible and powerful in Python. We've seen a lot of examples in today's lecture on how we can use them. Lists can be empty or containing many items. What's important about a list is they're enclosed within a brackets and use and the items separated by a comma. An index specifies the position of an item in the list, where index starts at 0 and go up by 1. The length of a list is how many items are in the list. List can be processed item by item, typically using a for each loop, where the next item on the list is automatically obtained, or for a loop using an index. Items can be added, append, or insert to a list, or deleted using remove from the list using appropriate functions. The plus operator can be used to combine lists. The in operator can be used to check whether an item is in or not in a list. This can be sliced to obtain part of that list. This can be copied. It can be sorted. And this lecture is the only introduction to list in Python. There's a lot more to it. You can learn it on your own time. Now, I just want to give a few comments. So I start marking the assignments, and so far you guys are doing really well. But I just want to have a few comments. First, please make sure when you submit the assignment is you submit the assignment in a file and the Python code in a separate file. Majority of you did it. Some of you didn't do it. Some of you asked me about they had a problem uploading the files. Please ask Latrobe to and seek their help to help you why you were unable. If that was your problem, ask them why you were unable to attach more than one file. I'm not very familiar with the system, so I can't tell you why this could happen. But the majority have managed to do it, so it might mean some settings in your end. You're not going to be marked down on this assignment, but for next assignments, I'm expecting that the program will be in a separate file. Please pay attention to the questions and only provide what the question asks. So if I'm not asking for validation, don't validate. Really pay attention to what is asked in the program. Some of you put some validation, which meant I'm not marking you higher because you put them, but some occasion these validation were not working as expected, so that forced me to mark you down if the code wasn't efficient or there was part of the code used that it didn't make sense or was used, which make the code inefficient. Pay attention to display. Some of you done a great work. I wanted to give you 100 out of 100, but then you forgot something like adding AUD at the end of the price. This assignment specifically converts money, so there's expectation when you display price, as it is in the run example, it had an AUD at the end of it. So you will be marked down if you didn't put that. Don't make small things like that stop you from having a full mark. think that's all I have about assignment. I'm trying my best to get it out in the next couple of days, the marks and evaluation, so that you can have time to have a look at that. And don't forget, we have another assignment due end of this week. Any questions? No. Someone wanted to ask a question? Dave?
I've got just trying to remember, I've got a question about the next assignment.
Yeah.
It was just, I've got to go back through it. It's asking for only inputting necessary inputs where they're being asked for, whether required. Are you able to talk about that now, or should we talk about it in the next hour?
Maybe in the next hour.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Yep.
Sure.
I just wanted to, if no one else have any question, general question, I need to find a way to send that to you. But we had a bit of confusion last tutorial about one of the question, which is was a concert ticket management. I think where was the confusion is you need to understand in the CEDA code, we were calling void function, but there was a variable put in there, which made people confused about how can you use void if it's expecting a return. So I couldn't reach out to Tim to ask him why he did it that way, but the only way I can think of what he was thinking is he was trying to demonstrate what will be the result of calling that void function. So this is how the program will look like. The purpose of that exercise was to make people more familiar using global variables, because when you call a function and you're using a global variable, whatever calculation will be done in that function, it will change the value of that variable, in which you can then refer to it or use it in other function in the program. So in this case, the variables, the global variables we were using is ticket fee, ticket type, and ticket type name. In every function, for example, the main function, the two variable of this three that we used are the ticket fee and ticket type name, which once we were calling the function input valid the ticket type, which is that one here. We were doing, this was the making sure that the ticket type it's valid, and once it was that, then it will store in here, which then we can use it throughout the main program. And ticket fee is calculated in the second function, or second sub function or third function in the program, which we were calculating the ticket fee, and whatever number it's assigned to the ticket fee, because this is a global, we identified as a global variable, it was used in the main function. I need to find a way to give you access to it. But yeah, that's the solution for that program. So can run it. So for example, for a child, that, for an adult is that, for pensioner is that, and then X to exit. It will just give us, sorry, I put the wrong X. It gives us the total amount. So number of tickets, total amount, and we'll finish. Any question about that one? That's it for today. Thank you very much. I'll be available from 11 to 12 on the other Zoom if you have any question. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. Tutorial on labs.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.